This is a show you're absolutely going to want to stay tuned for. We're talking with a former Gopher about what is to come with the new defensive line coach, as well as his thoughts being an alumni member but never having played under PJ Fleck, what his thoughts are on Coach Fleck and what's been building here. That and a whole lot more. Do not miss it at Locked On Golden Gophers.
Hey,
you are Locked On Golden Gophers.
No matter what we're going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
Your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
However it turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Be sure to hit subscribe on YouTube. We're building this community. I'm giving you the latest and greatest. We're getting more live shows incorporated, and you're definitely not going to want to miss out as we continue to build this thing from the ground up. Now, today we're talking with a former player of the Gophers. I'm not going to wait any longer, but there's a lot in this that you definitely want to stick around for, stay tuned for, because it's a lot of perspectives that many fans don't get behind the scenes when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to coaching staffs, and also more info on the new D-line coach, Coach Winston of the Minnesota Gophers. Wait no further, let's do it. You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we have a special guest on the show today, former Gopher defensive lineman for the Minnesota Gophers, played with new defensive line coach, Coach Winston. I'm going to butcher the last name, and I still got to learn it like the back of my hand. So I'll let you do that introduction or pronunciation maybe as we go. But now he's doing his thing over in the public speaking world and ready to make some waves there as well. Joining us today is Gaelin Elmore. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate you taking me up on my offer. And yeah, it's Winston Delattiboudere. So
right.
kind of how it sounds a little bit. But yeah, he's very patient with people getting the pronunciation down. So I don't think you have too many things to worry about there.
For sure. I mean, I'll definitely have to work on it. But, I mean, I had to work on Kaliak Manis too, and I got called out by his pops after one of the shows. So I definitely learned that one real quick after a couple butchers. So we'll get there. But before we dive into more on Coach Winston, I want to know more about you. I want to know why you chose Minnesota of the schools that you were looking at, and like what led you to that decision.
Oh, man. Honestly, it was the coaching staff at the time, and I know we've had a couple of changes since. But for me, as a kid that experienced kind of the adversity, the trauma that I did in my childhood, before I even understood it, I was drawn toward people that were empathetic and sympathetic toward the little guy. And as me as a recruit, I wasn't the little guy, so I don't that's not even how that ended up working. But in a lot of ways, my dad was, my high school program was, the way we did things was different. Like I was a tight end coming out, and I had 8 catches my junior year when I had started getting recruited. And so people are looking at my film and they saw me as I was just blocking people and playing within the system. And so there were so many things about being from a smaller Western Wisconsin town about I hated when I didn't like bullies. I hated when people kind of overlooked the little guy. And Jerry Kill very much was the little guy and the way he saw things. And I tell people this story often, even with my day job. When I was doing an unofficial visit to campus, and the Gopher basketball team was playing Indiana, and they were the number 1 team in the country. Victor Oladipo was on the team, one of the Keller brothers or whatever, whichever ones that went to Indiana was there. They were on their run, and I'm there with my high school coach and my dad. Which my background, I lived with my high school coach, but my dad was still in my life. And I was there with both of those men. And this game is nuts. Like the game is totally nuts. The barn is jumping. And the entire game, I couldn't find Coach Kill. I couldn't find my dad. They were off in the back just talking about life, talking about different things they experienced, both of them kind of being country boys around the same age. And it just dawned on me. I was like, yo, this is the biggest college basketball game of the night. ESPN's here. Like, we're about to upset the number one team, and Jerry's in the back talking to my dad. And me and my coach are just looking at each other like, what's going on? And that kind of mentality just drew me to the staff. It made what they were trying to sell me on hit a little bit more home, because it was real. They were like, we're going to do things the right way. We're not going to try to cut corners. We're not going to try to ask for handouts. We're going to work hard hat, lunch pail. That's what they would say. And that's just who they were. And yeah, once I saw that interaction with my dad and how they treated him compared to some of the other schools and how they disregarded my family background and history, that kind of valuing me and my story as a person was something that was different. And I knew that. And I wanted to be a part of what we were doing at the U. So that's kind of my story and how that happened.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And it gives a lot of background and insight to recruiting, everything that can make a difference too. And I think a lot of fans don't really know what goes on behind the scenes when it comes to recruiting. Even there's common misunderstandings about like, oh, it's just about money, or if you like the coach, then that's it. But there's so many little relationships, little things that can mean so much to a recruit. So definitely appreciate you sharing that viewpoint for the listeners.
Yeah,
now,
definitely.
With that, though, we have a lot of coaches we have 3 coaches on the way out. Putting back into your kind of recruiting mindset when you were a prospect,
Yeah.
would a position coach leaving highly influence you if you were already committed to a school, or would it be a major cause for concern, a smaller thing? Or what do you think in most recruits' eyes does it change at the position coach mean?
Honestly, I think it all comes down to what a program or what a program's approach in recruiting is. Meaning, if we're talking about with every kid, there's a unique combination of what your school can provide that's going to make them want to be a part of it. It's not cookie cutter. It's not, like you were saying, these kind of 2 check boxes, 2 categories things fall in. It's a variety of things, and coaches, a part of being a good recruiter is finding that out earlier than what your competitors are finding that out. And so I don't know what PJ and the staff, what their focus is, but I would look at it if there were schools that pitched me on my position coach, meaning this is what we do in this position room. This is what success this position coach has had. Again, getting recruited as a tight end, Wisconsin pitched me really hard on their history with tight ends and their tight end coach and how they utilize them and whatnot. And although my tight end coach at the U, I was there briefly, I played D-line, but my tight end coach there, we really just focused on the relationship. He wasn't my area recruiter, but because we were so close to campus, they allowed him to kind of be my primary point of contact. So it was a different approach with him. It wasn't like we had a good relationship, but my most important relationship was with Jerry. So it also differentiates there. I would say it won't matter that much if a school is really transparent about what goes into your time on campus. That being said, a lot of people wouldn't think about it, a strength coach leaving would be a big deal, because if you're being honest with the young kid, you're like, yo, 80% of your time is going to be spent with your strength and conditioning coach, if not more.
Mm-hmm.
I know they've changed some rules and they do some positional stuff throughout the year, but those guys are on the road. They're recruiting the next group of young men that are going to come in. And so, yeah, I don't know if it really would have swayed me a ton. I guess it's the matter of where they're going, why they're leaving, and the other things that factored into it. I know when I was getting like recruited, we actually had our linebacker. Well, the Jerry Kill staff, the big pitch there also was the stability of it. They had been together for so long, they didn't have turnover within their staff. And so that's something they actively talked about.
Okay.
And so if 3 guys would have left right before I got there, I'd have been, oh, something's up. But historically with PJ staff, you've seen guys come and go, and you've seen guys move on to other opportunities. Like you have Coach Mo, who's at Buffalo now as a head coach. You've seen guys kind of use Minnesota as a way to like get some credibility under their resume to move on to that next step. So I'm not going to act like there's there are kids either who just signed or that are looking to sign again are going to see that and immediately think, oh snap, I need to think about my decision. Now your OC is a little different. Your coordinator, offense, defensively, philosophy changes, so that next hire matters. Position coach, it matters on relationships, but X's and O's, I don't think there's that much that can be lost at this point in the process for a kid who has already signed in December or is going to sign in February.
Right. And also, I think a big thing you said there too was transparency. I mean, whether you're a grown adult now in your job or you're a kid in the recruiting trail, how transparent and open that communication line is and you're being communicated with makes a huge difference, because if you feel valued, if you feel a part of the process, you're probably more willing to consider staying or being fully on board because you are a part of what they're trying to build with. So huge part there. A quick word from our friends over at Built Bar. Built Bar is that amazing power pack protein bar with 17 grams of protein, but only 130 calories. Tastes delicious, better than a candy bar for you, but tastes really good. So you're definitely gonna want to give it a try. They've got anything from raspberry, anything from cookie dough chunk, anything from brownie batter, peanut butter brownie, mint chocolate chip brownie, churro, and so much more. All the options you could want, with something that tastes delicious and covered in 100% real chocolate. And not only can you find it online where you can use promo code LOCKEDON15 to get 15% off at built.com, but they also are starting to be carried in stores, including Walmart. So check out the Built Bar products at Walmart and get yours to try today. Now, before we dive into Coach Winston, I do have a quick question for you. I know we've talked about it or chopped it up a little bit, but you were recruited by Coach Fickle at one point. And so what do you remember about him, and what is Wisconsin getting at that head coach position?
Man, I was so mad when they hired him. Because like Paul Cruz was a great guy, and he was homegrown, like Wisconsin guy, but he was very, how do you put it? He wasn't a demonstrative personality. He wasn't like this. Like my high school coach was really good friends with Paul, Coach Chris, and he just was who he was. He was very even keel, very low demeanor. But that's a completely different feel compared to Coach Fickle. And even when I was getting recruited, like I would very much rather Wisconsin continue to hire the Gary Andersons of the world. Like that is where my heart is at. Like, yep, keep doing that. But man, Coach Fickle was at Ohio State when I was getting recruited, and he was the DC there. And he was one of the first guys to like really honestly tell me that, like, hey, I think your future's at defense. I think that's where, like, watching your tape, where you can really have the most potential. And as a kid, I was just like, I want to play tight end. I want to be on offense. I want to score touchdowns. I want to be Gronk, Jimmy Graham. Like that's where my head was at. And he just like really straightforward, like in a way, I didn't know him. It's not like we were talking on the recruiting trail. I met him when I went to campus, and he worked me out off to the side. And he built up enough rapport with me in that short time span to be able to honestly tell me he thought that I would be a better defensive end than I would tight end. And people just can't tell that to kids who are getting recruited. Tell it like it is, but in a way that doesn't push you away from them that fast. Like that doesn't happen. And I remember like the dude kicked my butt in the workout, like just went at me. And he was strong. Like he played the position, right? And he was like, I just walked away very impressed, felt very coached up. Like I walked away, I was like, I'm going to be a better player in my senior season because of what just happened, because of the 30 minutes I just spent with him. And so to see his rise from that time, and to see the success he's had, I'm not surprised he's been able to successfully coach up guys with potential that maybe don't have the same notoriety that other prospects might, and have that success that he did at Cincinnati. And then like to think that he gets to do that at Wisconsin with a bigger kind of brand, bigger budget, is really frustrating. I know he's going to be successful. I hope he's not, at least against us. So
No, I'm with you. I mean, I saw the hire and I was like, man, that looks like a really good hire. Then we talked a little bit and I did some more research, and I'm just like, I hate this hire. It's good for them, great for them, but as a rival, covering a team that I am also a fan of, seeing that's our rival's new head coach, absolutely don't like it for the future.
Yeah, he's got traits as a leader of young men that anyone who's like been in a locker room like that on that level, it's going to translate wherever they go. And there are certain traits that like similar, but in a very different way that PJ has. There's the reason why I was open to talking. There are traits that Winston has that Coach Debo is going to have in our program as a D-line coach as well. And so, yeah, it's tough when you see your rivals do something right for a change.
Yeah, I feel that. Well, perfect transition over though. Let's talk about Coach Winston. Let's talk about what he brings. You played with him. You were in a locker room with him. You have firsthand experience with what he brings, not only as a player, but as a leader, and he was one in some of his earlier years when you guys played together, right? So you saw him even as he was still growing, as he was still learning. So what gets you excited that he was the hire here? And also, I know like you were like, this is a home run hit. So tell the fans what they're getting.
Yeah. So I knew Winston. I met him weeks after he just turned 17. So, excuse me, background context. People have to understand, like, Winston was extremely young for his grade. So, like, he was 16 when he signed. He was 16 when he signed with the U as a defensive end out of high school. Turned 17 before he got on the campus, was 17 or was 18 when he got his first action in a Big Ten game. Like, Winston was 6'2". He was not only was he young, but he was undersized. And like the things that he had to do in order to even like make the field or make the traveling roster as a young kid, like he had to defy odds, right? Like you see him coming in at 6'2", 215, you're like, hey, I don't think you're gonna last. I don't think you're like, honestly, just size, those kind of like size is a talent, and especially in Big Ten football. And so like being able to see him like work through the hurdles of being a freshman on campus, being a young guy, work through the mental leap that you need to take, but also the physical commitment to your body. Like he had to like have specific meals to put on the necessary weight to be around. And then you saw him, like he got chances as a redshirt freshman over guys that were bigger than him, that had a higher pedigree. Even my junior year, like a year that I was supposed to like be the leader on the defensive line, like he was biting my heels to like take my spot. And it's just like Winston as a player had this ability to defy odds. And when you even like, and this is why the home run aspect that I'm so excited about is those characteristics that you see in people that you know you can be a leader of young men. And like there's just something about individual people that we all know people like this that have this innate, authentic sense and feel about them where they are
Right.
being themselves 100% of the time. And you may cringe at it, but like it galvanizes people. It like people flock to him. Like again, Winston was 17 walking into a locker room and like he was from Baltimore. He was boldly Baltimore, like all through and through. But like dudes loved him. Even though he was super energetic, talked too loud, did too much, kind of a freshman, people loved him. And you saw the way that his class like flocked to him, even though and normally the way that goes is like the freshmen that are playing, the freshmen that like are going to get the most snaps and have the biggest role or the one that are the ones that get thrown into the leadership position in their class. Winston redshirted his freshman year, but guys out off the field were still like that with him. And so then when I was done and I was able to watch him lead in a different way, I was able to see that trajectory continue, still staying in contact with him. Like those same traits carried over into a leadership role when he was older, and he was still contributing, still fighting, still working through a new style of defense to find his role. It was a beautiful thing to watch. And so what I know of Winston, what I know he's capable of, but what also is just a part of who he is, like people are drawn toward him.
Right.
And as a kid, as someone who's going to get recruited, like he may not have the resume that X coach might have from the school, but I'm still going to be drawn toward him. Like there are things about him being who he is authentically that's going to communicate to me directly, indirectly, that I can be myself with him, that I can show up in his position meeting room and perform on the field the way that I feel like I'm capable of doing to be successful. And what a lot of people don't understand, man, is if you get to this level, you have the talent to be all conference. You have the talent to be successful and get accolades. The difference between the people that reach it and don't are the confidence that they've gotten along the way to perform on Saturdays. It's like, and you see, like, it's the craziest thing to see happen when you see a guy. Let me think of someone. Trying to think of someone during my time that was like, you saw it shift. Like, I think KJ May was one. KJ May was a receiver during my time at the U that, like, my freshman year was kind of like the fourth, fifth option, and like didn't get a ton of looks, like wasn't a household name, but the confidence that was instilled in him. Well, he was a confident person anyway, but once that spring ball came around in those first couple games, like he became a key part of that 2015 offense.
Right.
That confidence went through the roof, and he took off and had a phenomenal year. But there's so much about success at this level. Like, you need to build up the confidence behind the scenes and then have that actually pay dividends when you go out there on the field. When you do that, then you can have that success. And a lot of that starts with the coach. A lot of that starts with how can a coach build that confidence up in you when you aren't seeing it on Saturdays yet. And when those two things come together, that's when you see guys churn out people at a really, really high rate. That's why you see the defensive back kind of prowess we have consistently over the last decade, is because even when they weren't performing on Saturdays, there was a confidence in their ability because of what they were doing within the room that guys were going to ball when it was their turn. And Winston has that. And then even just through our conversation, seeing his growth, like we've had even our D line from that 2016 season stays in contact pretty consistently. And Winston was a part of that. And there was a conversation we were just having about defensive line play like 2 years ago. So maybe it was a year and a half ago, right before Winston got to Akron. And we were having a conversation, and like very quickly, everyone realized that Winston, although he was one of the young guys of that group, very quickly, like he was the most knowledgeable about defensive line play at that point. And it's a weird feeling to know someone like you knew them when they were a kid.
Right.
To think that like, oh, you're better at this than I am. Or
right.
like
the student has become the master sort of.
Yes. Like there was a realization I had of that. I was like, and I told him one day, I was like, Winston, you would have made me a better defensive lineman if I played under you. Like, I genuinely believe I would have been a better pass rusher, which if anyone paid attention when I was playing, like I was a run stopper. That was my thing. But I was like, there are ways that you're teaching this that I've never thought about. And I spent an off season in an NFL locker room. Like I spent an off season at that level. And so there's been growth and maturation since I've been in a locker room with Winston, where he is a consistent student of the game, which makes him such a good teacher. And
I think that shows too. I mean, you look at he was in your system, then he brings in that new system when he's playing with the new coaching staff. Then he's going to Mario Cristobal and a graduate assistant over there with Oregon. Then he's a D-line position coach at Buffalo, and now he's getting an opportunity at the Big Ten to learn all those systems and show that much effectiveness. It just shows how quick he is with that IQ and that knowledge of the position.
And being able to teach pass rush principles within the scheme of the defense each place he goes. And now I want people to understand this as well. Like when Winston was in Oregon, he had some unique exposure to high level talent. Like there's so much to be said about knowing what that looks like in the film room, knowing what that looks like on the practice field, knowing what that looks like walking around. To be around that type of talent, not just Oregon. So this is something I don't think people understand. There are all pro or like defensive linemen in the NFL that went to Oregon, that are on the West Coast, that will go to Oregon to train, to go to Oregon to do kind of a D-line pass rush summit. So you have the Eric Armsteads of the world with the 49ers. You have DeForest Buckner with Indianapolis. You have the San Francisco D-line group in general. And there's other like pass rush specialist coaches that go out there to train guys. And then while he was there, they had Kayvon Thibodeau, who was a top 5 NFL draft pick and now with the Giants. And so he had time out there studying, working, learning, like just gaining this wealth of knowledge about something that the U has historically like struggled with out there. And then to see it or like to coach it on the field with that Oregon squad, that's a big deal.
Right.
And so that's exposure and experience that even a coach been doing this for 10 more years than Winston may not have. And that's why it's like, yeah, inexperience, sure. But what other things are you being exposed to that are a new kind of approach in this current modern era of football? And that kind of like pass rush summit, pass rush specialist approach is something new in the last 5 years. And Winston has been able to be a part of it. And so he's been able to break it down to coachable and digestible steps, rather than telling a guy like, hey, in the film room when we're watching one-on-ones, you need to do a better job with your hands here. Now it's like going back to our own vernacular of like, what do we coach? What do we teach? Repeat that to me. Why did this rep not work? Oh, because you were slow with your eyes and your hands were slow as well. So how can you use that to like get your hips around and bend the corner next time? And he's able to talk about in ways that we were out at the U fighting for our lives, like blindly. Like we were literally bringing water guns to a gunfight in a lot of ways, because there was so much about our position that was meant to set things up for other people. we were meant to do our job on first and second down to now bring in guys who only pass rush, who don't worry about anything else, which
Right.
that creates a really hard flow and rhythm to pass rushing. And I know that's a reason I keep talking about that, because I know that's what Gopher fans want out of this.
Right.
And
Right.
and then, like, man, he was able to coach or play with Boye Mafe. He was able to play for a long time, or even be in the same class with Carter Coughlin and the guys we've had success with in the last couple of years. I'm excited about it, man. It's going to bring some stability to a room that needs it, but also a jolt of life and unique and authentic energy that I think young kids can really, really get behind and thrive with. So it's weird to be old enough to have my former teammates getting positions or position coaching jobs at my alma mater. But yeah, Winston is the right one, man. I promise that.
No, that's awesome. And I think that if any Gophers fan walks away with this podcast right here and they're not a little bit intrigued and excited, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, like, you just heard about not only the unique experiences he had out in Oregon that many people don't have, the resume will come. It'll build itself,
Yep.
especially as you have that personality, that magnetic draw to you, and building more rapport with recruits that want to be around that. The resume itself will come. So that's definitely exciting for Gophers fans. Now, I want to close this show off with two just quick more questions with you. The first one is, so you didn't play under Coach Fleck at all, right?
No.
So what, just being an alumni member, understanding football, and with an outside perspective, what are your thoughts on how he has done thus far?
Man, he's been here 6 years now, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's wild to think about. So I had a couple month overlap with PJ, and he was young when he got the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like PJ's like 14 or 15 years older than me. He was young when he got the job. And so I've seen so much maturity and just like the way that he continues to lead authentically himself. I see so much. It's weird. There's growth that has happened, but he's still the same person that he's been. And so I admire that ability to continue to grow and row, like he says. It's a real thing. And there is never a destination that we reach. And so I appreciate and admire that about him. Honestly, man, he does a phenomenal job of keeping the program relevant, keeping it fresh and relatable to a new and younger generation. When Minnesota, we're typically not too like open to those kinds of things, right? Like, and I'm sure there's still fans that don't like that, but it matters when you can do something as a program, and whether it give a scholarship to a walk-on, do something cool with the team. When you can make news by doing stuff within your culture that is fun and exciting and is more than just football, recruits and young kids notice that.
Right.
Like when you see on social media, like, oh, they went to the Beyonce concert. Like, even if you don't like Beyonce, you're like, oh, like you're experiencing life. And there's
Right.
so much about this current state of like society where younger kids are very much more about like focused on like, what about the entire experience? Like, what am I going to get out of it beyond just good football or exposure? Like, it's not just that anymore. That's not right, wrong, or indifferent. It's a necessary part of what you have to do now. And so whether it's from jerseys to different things that they're doing through the community service stuff that they do, he does a phenomenal job of keeping the program relevant and continuing allowing the program to be talked about in positive ways. That, like, I know when I was there, we could have did better about, like, we were very hard hat lunch pail, and that's great. But
Mm-hmm.
at some point, like, dude, putting on my hard hat and going to war for the 1,000th day in a row here is I need a break. I need a concert. I need the Dave and Buster's. I need something.
Right.
So I think he does a good job of that. And I really see PJ as a CEO, and the way he just does things, and like kids are able to like see what a CEO looks like firsthand every single day. And so they are learning how to be successful through the leadership of PJ. And as someone who, like, when I got done with football, I had to like take off the football hat and then put on a different one.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's preparing kids and his team to like, no, this is the Gaelin hat that you're wearing, and football is just a part of it. Like, I think that's such an important aspect of the program. And I think that is why you're going to see like some sustained success, because it is more than just football. And some people don't like that, but that's just the reality of what it is.
No, I absolutely like that. And I think that it's a perspective that a lot of fans just looking at the sport don't think about, is like how he is aiming to set up success beyond football. Even if football, you're not going to the next level, you can still be a great leader and individual with what you do moving forward. So it's definitely a perspective people don't think about. Now, I'll end it with this, and you might not have an answer for me, you might, but it'll be something brief. Is knowing that offensive coordinator position is most likely changing, it seems, as Kirk is headed out to Rutgers. Were there any surprise offenses this year that you think the Gophers could take a look at when it comes to considering their next offensive coordinator? And I'll let you kind of brainstorm. One thing that popped in my mind recently was Tulane. Tulane was a heavy run program, had some great offensive or passing efficiency as well. They were like 61st in the nation when it came to passing, but they were only like two rankings or metrics behind the Gophers in rushing. I think that could be a unique perspective, but I was just curious if there were any offenses this year that stood out to you for them to consider.
Man, that's a wild question, because I'm a defensive guy at heart.
Right.
So I don't really look at offenses like, man, it'd be nice if the Gophers are in that. It'd be like, man, it's nice that I didn't have to play against it. I love the Tulane one just because watching them. Well, when I was at ECU, we had a chance to play them. It was a different regime, but it always felt like they had good running backs, and that is the same this year watching them and the success they had in the bowl game against USC. I'm trying to think, because like there's a reality of spread in the Big Ten in November is just like you're giving up a home field advantage if that is what the focus is. And so multiple to me is very much the way that I think we should go, and being like Kaliak Manis, like having him being a dual threat option, but not losing the like hit you in the mouth, like ground and pound aspect. I just think it's our home field advantage in the later parts of the season. But I do think having some more multiple looks and being confident when we have to pass is something that it needs to change.
Right.
And too much, it's been like our run first mindset has like made us uncomfortable passing, even during my time there. And so the ability to get, and I even think Wisconsin just shared this of like, we want to be just as good at passing as we are running. Doesn't mean we want to run the ball less. And I think that's a similar approach that we need.
Right. No, I'm absolutely with you. And I think before we get kicked off here, I think that's something for Gophers fans to consider, and we'll dive into more on the show as the offseason progresses. But Gaelin, thank you so much for joining us here at Locked On Golden Gophers.
Thanks for having me.
I'm sure that we'll touch base again. We'll get you on here again at some point too, but I think this perspective was great for the fans, so thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. It was a blast.
All right, Gophers fans, it's going to do it for us. This is Kane Rob signing off. Row the boat. Sky you man. Go Gophers.